7 years ago, I was filming a documentary and volunteering to build bamboo homes for families whose houses had been destroyed by a horrendous earthquake. It was here that I became friends with a girl named Tanya. She had grown up in the southwest of France, done high school and university in the UK, trained to become a lawyer, and then craved something more meaningful and moved into the humanitarian world. I can still taste the lime and the saltiness of the fresh ceviche we ate on that beach in Ecuador and feel the energy between us as we chatted excitedly about life and our shared choice of living a nomadic existence far from home. Although she was living in Madrid and I was living between Monaco and London, somehow, like modern-day pen pals, we remained a support for each other throughout the highs and lows we both experienced over the next 7 years. Hello. So this episode, grab some snacks, grab a drink, pull up a chair and join us at this table. I'm having a chat with one of my very good friends, Tanya. She's led quite an interesting life. She is a mountaineer. She has her own creative agency that creates content for the humanitarian world. We talk a lot about friendship, about frequenting the people that bring out the best version of you, how to choose the right city and town that really brings out the best side of you as well. And not that we have all the answers, but it's just a discussion, which I think is interesting given so many of you write to me about this subject. We talk about our vulnerabilities, about being lonely as an expat, about what it's like working from home, working for yourself. We had lots of lovely food. We were eating and talking basically and sitting at this table for the entirety of her stay. What do you think of the gluten-free tiramisu?
It was delicious. I would like some more. I'm waiting for another slice.
Guido's just here having a debate with Tanya, although it's not really a debate because they're on the same side. About the
discussion.
A discussion, yeah. About the perils of social media.
And then also if we were
I think the Prosecco is certainly helping your discussion. It's like
it's
we're fueled by bubbles. There's a little bit of time in the pool and with her taking long walks with her dog and with Gianfranco, and it was really lovely. I think she speaks with a lot of sincerity, and 21 she was volunteering working with prisoners on death row in Jamaica, where she was living. And then she lived in Madrid, so we have that in common, that we've both lived in many different places, and this could be helpful for any of you who are just thinking about making that move. If you're thinking you just feel a bit blocked and you're not sure if you want to stay in the city that you're living in, even not to leave your country, but just to move into a town where you could find more of a community. And we talk about that and how actually hard it can be when you're an expat, and what friendships mean, when to let go of friends and when to hang on to them. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, and they provide therapy that is more affordable, more accessible, because you can do it in your home. You can do a video chat or a call, or you can message your therapist in between sessions. You can change your therapist if you feel like you don't click with them, and you can do that free of charge. And I think for people like us, me and Tanya, that's certainly something that could have benefited us in all these times when we've been living in foreign countries, and you can feel quite alone sometimes, or even if you're just about to make a big change in your life, sometimes you just need some clarity and to speak to somebody who's objective. If you're in that position, or even if you're struggling with some kind of anxiety, then BetterHelp might be able to offer you a solution. They are offering my community 10% off the first month of therapy if you click the link, and I'll just put it in the description box of this video. It's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kylie. And I think they do a very good job of tailoring the person to your background, your situation, because you can choose exactly what type of person, what type of therapist you need right now in your life. So thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Thank you to my lovely friend Tanya. We had lots of laughs, and most of all, it's just a very honest conversation. So hopefully it might be interesting to some of you, just to pull up a chair now and join us. And thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, no, this is Guido's chair.
Easy access.
Yeah. We've basically just been sitting here for the last few days and nights and over lunch and dinners and everything, just talking with Guido as well, and Tanya's lovely dog Nelson, and so we basically got to know each other building bamboo homes in Ecuador.
Yeah.
And fell in love. Well, I fell in love.
We did, but you know what? Actually, after that, we didn't see each other in person for about 3 years.
Really?
Yeah, it was
It didn't feel like that.
No,
did
it was just a phone friendship for a really long time.
But such a phone friendship, and
it was,
texts,
it was glorious.
I was traveling to a different country every week. You were doing the same for your work.
Yeah, I think just it was a kind of kindred spirits sort of thing.
How do you manage working from home? Because it's obviously, it's a while now that in the world it's been the dream of everyone, and then now I notice that more and more articles are coming out being like, hang on, just how healthy is it for us to have no contact with colleagues? And
do you know, it's very up and down, because I'm somebody who, to be really productive, I have to have my own space and no distractions. So in that respect, it works really well. But it has to be a balance. So if I have too much of that in a row, I almost get a little bit depressed. Like I'm craving human interaction, and you know, I mean, in French it's like se changer les idées un peu, so to kind of mix things up a bit, so that you look at things from a different perspective, and you know, and sometimes, you know, I've tried this thing of taking my laptop to a coffee shop with Nelson, and then everyone's just obsessed with Nelson, and you don't get any work done. But also, I don't, even though I do find it engaging and a little bit stimulating, I just don't get the work done. So I don't know. I think it's, as you say, you know, because I get to travel with my job. You know, I quite welcome the time that's spent at home. You just need a balance of some kind. And I mean, it's the same with you when you go and interview people and you have that interaction.
But we're different in the sense that I'm certainly an introvert. I adore one-on-one interactions. I can do groups, but I like just retreating into my own space and home and having that time. And you're an extrovert, although except when you're on the mountains, you're happy to be in your own little world. Do you think you're an extrovert?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
As in, I get energy from other people.
Yeah.
Which I think is the definition of an extrovert,
exactly.
is it? Yeah. So I get more energy from being with other people than I do from being alone.
Solitude,
But at the same time, my entire life, even though I grew up one of four, I have always spent an insane amount of time by myself.
Right.
So I'm very good at it.
Yeah.
And so I think I've just like adapted to it, but I think naturally I'm probably more of a social being.
We're always talking about the question of friends and keeping in touch with people and choosing as you go through different ages and different stages of your life what friendships do you want to cultivate and really nourish, because it does take effort. Do you know what I mean? And especially if you're trying to manage your own business, I think you can go through different stages of life, or at least I have, where I've thought, okay, this friendship was really great for that time of my life, and now it's not like it's dead. It's not like we're breaking up or anything, but it's just it's we're no longer resonating on the same level, and then with other people it's sort of like with you, and I mean, you were fortunately saying, oh, you know, you're thank goodness we can still chat even though I'm sleep deprived and have a child, and that's such a different. This is such a different life stage for me. Do you know what I mean?
I think possibly because I'm a Cancer, so no, but it's true. I like Cancerians are very nostalgic. You know, they hold on to the past and always, and I really do that. I really struggle to let go of people.
Do you?
I really do, because everything's meaningful to me, and you know, it's all, and I just feel really sad whenever something. Oh. No, I do. I'm like, oh no, not another thing's come to an end. But so I think that's part of it, and it's really kept me in certain friendships that really I outgrew, or they outgrew,
Yeah.
you know, a decade ago.
Yeah.
And we're still sort of circling each other, and it's probably really unfulfilling for both of us.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, neither of us will let go.
Yeah.
And I certainly won't, because I will never be the dumper ever.
Yeah. You're like, come on.
I'm like, I'm so loyal.
Even though we have nothing
common.
anymore, yeah.
But I honestly, I'm like, it's like loyal to a fault.
Yeah.
Like, it comes a point where it's like, seriously, this is not. But no, and I do. But I'm finally starting to listen to my intuition a lot more, and just recognizing that, you know, sometimes, you know, you'll go and you'll spend a whole evening with somebody, and you come home and you actually feel drained by that interaction, and recognizing that actually it's not a bad thing. It's just that we've evolved along different paths, and perhaps it may be in 10 years' time we merge again, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm finally starting to pay attention to that.
Yeah. No, I think it's important for people also. I think even if people in their 20s and can somehow internalize it a lot and think, oh, it's me, I'm not good socially, or I'm not I wasn't as funny or as exciting as all those other people at that group, at that dinner, at that whatever, that event, and it may not be. It may just be you're with the wrong people.
Yeah.
And when you're with the right people, you find yourself come alive, and suddenly you're
amazing.
funny, and you're you know, you're fun to be around.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's important to often say it's not you, it's them. And it's not even their fault, because they, you know, they maybe can find other people with whom they are more connected as well. But when you can just sit there, I mean, we've both had this, of sitting there at a dinner, or even just at a coffee one-on-one with someone, and thinking, we don't care about the same things, and it's not. But
the thing is, you know it when you. But it's connection. It's a question of human connection. When you really connect with someone, it just flows. Like there's an ease to it, and a mutual interest in what each other has to say.
Yeah.
And you know, when you really laugh with someone and it's real.
Yeah.
I mean, the feeling is like incredible. Or like when somebody makes you cry with laughter. I mean, I'm just like, you're a winner.
Yeah.
You're a stay in my life.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, and I'm not saying we all have to be really funny for there to be human connection. Yeah. But it's just that, you know, there's a reason it feels natural.
Yeah.
In those cases. And, you know, and me being the Cancerian, then I'm like, don't leave, because I want to keep hold of those connections. But and then just recognizing that also, you know, there will be times in friendships where, you know, there have been times where I've been going through a really low point in my life where, you know, it's probably actually quite tough to talk to me because I'm being negative, and, you know, and so friendships go through those ebbs and flows as well. And that's not a loss of connection. It's just that, you know, that's when you're, what's the non-fair weather friends. Right, so, you know, fair weather friends who are only there when you're being sunshine.
I think you and I we've both gone through lots of different highs and lows, and you know, we've known each other at very different times of our life, you know what I mean, like when we've
but I mean, we've known each other for 7 years, 8 years. No, and there have been times where I've been so low that I wouldn't pick up the phone, and there have been times where you've been so low and you wouldn't pick up the phone. And I remember us talking about, we just have to force ourselves to make the effort to just call the friend and say, I really need to chat, because actually you always feel better from it, without fail. But it's just, I don't know, not wanting to be a burden.
We're both quite polite, and we think, I only want to call you if I'm you know,
when I'm in sunshine mode,
decent conversationalist. But no, I think, and also I think it can be hard living in a foreign country, because sometimes the friendships that you make can be quite transient. Like if you might connect with someone in Madrid or wherever, or I was in Japan, and it'd be great, like, oh, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm doing this project, and I'm going to be here for another 6 months, and then I'll be gone. Or people who just say, I'm loving Madrid, and then you speak to them a year later and they say, oh, it's the honeymoon's over, it's just not for me, and they move on, and you say, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll reconnect if we're ever in London or something.
But that's actually where, you know how I feel about social media generally, but that's where there's a lot of value in social media, because you can, you know, there was a time when I really used it, and especially when I was traveling, you know, all the time, I literally, whichever city I was flying through, there was somebody to have a coffee with or a drink, and it was such an incredible kind of global community. And, you know, and I do, now that I've left social media, I do think back to those times, think actually now I have complicated things for myself slightly.
Although you missed an epic... was it lunch? No, it was lunch.
It was lunch yesterday
with Guido and Tanya going on. And the reason I love you both is because you're not on social media, and neither of you give a damn about Instagram. I love that. But yeah, no, we were saying about just how great it is to be without it. But yeah, there are those times when it is difficult to maintain. I mean, some of the closest people to me, like you, like my friend Brian, you know, they're like Sophie, you know, they're all in different parts of the globe. And I think it's like I was saying to you, the classic sort of stereotype is to have that group of friends that you meet up with routinely every Friday night, or maybe you have every Tuesday. And but that's not always easy to facilitate, you know, especially with me living in the countryside. But that doesn't mean that you can't have the depth of friendship on the contrary. Sometimes I feel like when we connect, we're just super present with each other, because it's not just meeting up for a coffee. It's like, okay, I'm coming to Italy. Oh, by the way, Tanya drove here from London. With her dog.
Well, because I have to with my dog. I'm not gonna. How would I get him here?
I know, but it's incredible. It's incredible. I just but you know, I think that makes up for it. You know, like it may not be like the classic you know, friends that you see portrayed in sitcoms or on the movies, but sometimes...
But I think those friendships, you know, there's a bit of... Both sides have to sacrifice something. So, you know, for us, we want that slightly nomadic travelling experience and to travel the world, and therefore you sacrifice that community that you would naturally build if you stayed in one place your whole life. And for them, you know, for people, not for them, sorry, but for people who choose to do that instead of travelling or aren't able to for whatever reason, then they get the incredible luxury of a community support their entire life.
Well, Guido, for example, I mean, Guido's never left Florence, and he has these amazing friendships, which I
mean, it's beautiful,
admire, because and no, it is, and like Jacopo and that, who he's known from birth, and I just think, gosh, that's quite remarkable.
But I remember after your wedding, I just couldn't stop thinking about it on the flight home, and I was like, that was just so wonderful to experience a friendship group that is just so tight knit, because I have never had that, you know, my whole life, because, you know, even in France growing up, you know, we were accepted, because, you know, I was very lucky in terms of where my parents chose to settle in France, but we were still outsiders because we weren't French, and, you know, and then I went to school in England, and then I was the French girl, so, you know, I didn't fit in there either, and so people had already created their bonds, and same in France. And then I went to university, and I was constantly off doing a million different things. So I never kind of settled into one group. And then straight out of university, I went to Jamaica, and then I did. But it's the life I chose, and, you know, that's the decision I made, and same for you. And therefore, you know, it was only really during the pandemic where I was forced to stay still. And that's when you got married. It was kind of a year later, or I feel like, and that's why I think it hit me so deeply at your wedding, because I witnessed this beautiful unit, and I really sort of appreciated it for what it is, and I thought, gosh, I've never craved it, and now I want it. I was like, how do I make it?
No, I know. Oh, damn it. Like,
so then I was like, I'll stay in London for 3 years. No, not working.
But I suppose that, as with anything, that there's pros and cons to both choices, and
but sacrifices on both sides, you know, and it's maybe you can have both. Maybe there is a way of having both, but I haven't worked it out yet.
Well, I do think, though, the way that we've done it, you can really be very discerning and pick your friends and say, I want you.
Yeah, no, but that's true.
Because we absolutely didn't grow up. We didn't even go to university in the same hemisphere.
No, I know.
But then I think you have to make more of an effort. If when we met, I was like, okay, where was I living? I can't recall. I think I was living in Monaco.
No, you were living in London.
Oh, yeah, I was, yeah. And then I was living in London. You were living in Madrid.
Yeah, and we met in Ecuador.
Yeah, we met in Ecuador. But then we were like, okay, well, we're really going to have to make a concerted effort to stay in each other's lives. But I just remember being in Ecuador, and where we were staying was sort of this place where they had all the volunteers, and then where we were staying, they had no running water. And I remember just seeing you, though, in the morning, just super bright and cheery, which we were just saying we're both morning people. Yeah. We're like, haven't showered, just all sweaty and disgusting, but it's all good. And I thought, oh yeah, this sounds like someone I want to be friends with. and then I went off to Louisiana, and you went somewhere else. I went to
where did
which
I
you can
go?
see on my channel. Actually, you can see the video for both for Ecuador and Louisiana.
I think I was supposed to come to Louisiana with you, and then I went somewhere else. I don't know where I went.
So why now you're thinking we didn't get back to that?
And so I ended up just volunteering for a human rights foundation. So at 22, and it was called the Independent Jamaican Council for Human Rights, and they were basically fighting death row.
Wow.
So trying to get it abolished in Jamaica. In Jamaica, which is like one of the most dangerous countries on earth, I was interviewing these inmates on death row. But basically, I kind of wanted to be a human rights lawyer. That was, it all sort of started in Jamaica. That was the point of interest. And then, but financially, you have to get yourself through law school. And the only really way to do that in the UK is to get a training contract with a big corporate law firm.
Yeah.
So they sponsored me. And then I wanted to go to human rights. And what happened, it was sort of a divine intervention, I don't know what you want to call it, like timing thing, but I had my heart broken at 29, which coincided with the Nepal earthquake happening. And so I sort of just quit law and thought, I'm going to go off to Nepal and help. And that's how the whole humanitarian side started.
But I remember you telling me when we first met that you were, I think, sleeping on the floor or something somewhere in Nepal, and you just thought, this is what I should be doing. This feels good. This feels like me.
It was also, I'd been in London and stuck in the corporate world, working in the city and surrounded by, a certain type of person. And it just wasn't making me happy. Like, it wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't true to who I was. And then in Nepal, you're stripped back of all those, the basic, more than basic necessities, like all these kind of material things that you become quite attached to, and a certain lifestyle. And it was really empowering, and it was very character building, the whole experience. And just seeing people who'd lost absolutely everything and yet retained this incredible humanity and positivity and ability to kind of just dust themselves off and start again. And
didn't you pitch yourself to the CEO and say,
yeah, I did.
What if I did? No, but that's important, because I think some people might say, I know a lot of people write to me and they say, okay, so I'm really attracted to the humanitarian world, or I'm really attracted to the arts world, or cinema or something. But then how do you segue from either university or another career into that? And sometimes I guess you do have to just say, in spite of it seeming a bit forward, or in spite of you thinking, okay, I'm sure they've got lots of other applicants, just saying, looking someone in the eye, and if you are sincere and passionate, they can tell that you're going to be a keeper, and that they'll give you they should employ you, It
really was a kind of, I had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And I think when you get to that point, and I'd lost the person I thought I was going to spend my life with. I had Nelson, my dog, but who was well taken care of by my family, and I was so passionate about the work this group was doing. I sent an email saying, I got home and I just couldn't sleep, and I thought, what am I doing? I need to be working for these people. I knew they had super tiny they had no budgets, I didn't even know if they were able to hire additional people, and I just sent an email, sort of, I remember, in the middle of the night in rural France. I was back home, and I just said, I literally can't sleep because all I'm thinking about is working for you guys, and what can I do? Could I even volunteer on the side remotely? Like if there's any way you need any kind of communication support or legal help, they were an American organisation, and I was qualified as an English solicitor, which is a little bit different. So I just kind of put it out there. It was just literally, I think sometimes you do just have to jump in many ways. No, and I was fortunate. He wrote straight back and he said, we're always on the lookout for people, but I don't know that there is a role. Send me your CV, I'll pass it on to the CEO and let's just see. And the whole thing honestly took about 3 weeks. And then the CEO called me out of the blue and sort of said, well, look, we've got external lawyers, there's no room for a lawyer here. He said, we're recruiting a director of communications. He said, I'm not quite sure how transferable your skills are. We just sort of thought, let's just try this on a trial basis. And I don't think they were quite expecting me to just throw myself into it, really willy-nilly.
Because it wasn't just sitting in front of a laptop writing press releases. You were every week in a different country, in a different disaster zone, because they dealt with crisis, natural disasters. They didn't do they didn't go anywhere near conflict, but they also dealt with domestic disasters. So the US is I mean, certainly in the southern states, they get a lot of crises and tornadoes and hurricanes and all sorts of things. So they were dealing with longer term natural disasters and the repercussions of that in the US, and then also responding to international crises as well. So it was double whammy. And then you got Zika, you had malaria, you had
dengue.
You've had it all.
But now you've seen mosquitoes and the way
and you have. Tanya has really very little fear. I
do have fear.
No, you don't. Let's just contextualize you a little bit. So basically, you're quite intrepid. I should also add, one of Tanya's great passions is climbing mountains, and climbing mountains that are serious too. And it's your therapy. You've always said, this is whenever we've spoken, and if you're going through a time where you've felt quite stressed or just overwhelmed by life, you've said, I need to get up a mountain, Kylie. And indeed, you'll choose a mountain, and not just say you'll go off to where, Slovakia or wherever.
No, Kyrgyzstan is my favourite. Yeah.
And that's quite... It's fascinating. A lot of people they'll go and do Machu Picchu or something with a group, but you'll go off with just one other person, and
I will always go with a guide. Always. So I'm not. Interesting what you were saying about fear, because and people do say that to me. Oh my goodness, it must take such balls to go and do stuff like that. But the thing is, I think, if it doesn't take guts, if you're not afraid of something, there are certain things, like for me, honestly, like expressing my emotions or telling somebody, a man, that I love them, that is far more terrifying than being, with my crampons and my ice axe on a glacier. That for me is liberating.
Yeah, you're like, hang on, I'll just do K2 and then I'll come back and maybe I'll be ready.
But so it's courage only comes when there is a real fear there.
You're right. And in fact, a lot of people always say to me, how do you go with starting over in a new city, or in a new country, particularly when you arrive alone and you don't know anyone and you're kind of anonymous in a city. And I think you could speak to that with a lot of insight. But you're right. I've always felt, I know that feeling when you're on the plane, and I just feel exhilarated. I don't feel scared. So sometimes I don't know how to answer it in a way that's generous or even helpful to people, because I get excited. That the fewer people I know, the better. The more excited I feel. I don't know why. And
but it's
is it the same for you? Do you mind if I just grab some water?
No, of course. Is it the same for me? I tell you honestly, for me, and I love traveling, and I find it more than anything, it's just, you know, a need for variety and a need for stimulation and inspiration, because, you know, I find personally, for me, I do not find London or the UK a particularly inspiring place. And that's just a personal, you know, preference. It's, for me, it doesn't stimulate me in the right way creatively. But I think that the only fears I do have around going to a new city or somewhere like that probably is like a fear of loneliness.
Yeah.
Because there have been times that, you know, I've been, and I never get it in the mountains, weirdly,
Really?
you know, because you're just at one with nature. It's a different thing. I think it can be far lonelier to be in a hyper busy, buzzing, vibrant environment where everybody's out celebrating, or, you know, and you don't have that little sense of community. I find that far more isolating, and that's where feelings of loneliness, you know, in the past I have had that.
Particularly in European cities, because you can be in your apartment and you'll hear people out in the street. They're sitting outside in the restaurants. They're not tucked away. They're outside.
Exactly.
So you're like, oh, everyone's got friends or a partner or something, you know.
And it's interesting because it took the pandemic to get me to go back to London. And it was purely because, you know, pivot again, but I set up the business. And I'd been so afraid of going back to London. Because I don't find it that inspiring, but I thought maybe that was just a time and a place, and, you know, sometimes you need to go away from something to then come back and appreciate it. And then
you're like, no, still not me.
Still not me.
Sorry.
I tried 3 years. I'm like, no. But I did. Sorry,
I'll just add something. Not that we're hating on London, because, for example, you were just telling me how you went to the theatre and you love those aspects of the city, and you always go with Nelson in the parks and say how beautiful
100%.
they are. So
no, I'm really
London's a great city.
I'm not a London hater. It's just that it's not my place. You know, it's not my place in the world, and I will always go back and visit, and I think appreciate it a lot more for what it has to offer. Not living there.
The pandemic brought you back there, and then you set up your own business, which is also, that's courageous.
I have no commercial acumen. I've had no business training. You know, I sort of, that was my trepidation, was I just thought, goodness, you know, what am I doing? But actually, the pandemic was a great enabler, because so many people said to me, you are mad setting up a business during the pandemic. But the thing is, you know, it was the absence of noise, and you know, I didn't feel like I should be out there doing stuff. You know, I literally got down to the nitty gritty detail, and I had that time and space to be able to do it. I mean, it's phenomenally challenging. It's immensely rewarding. It's frustrating. It's wonderful. You know, it's sort of a roller coaster. I think that's what it's always like.
You decided you wanted to leave London.
So I'm now being very deliberate and intentional about where I go, based on this newfound intuition of what feels draining and what feels good. And so Spain has always felt, I've always had a kind of affiliation with Spain. And, you know, I have sufficient language to be able to kind of create a life there. I also have kind of a network of some of my creatives who are based in Spain. So, and they have this new visa, and I can drive Nelson there. So all the little pieces fit, but then it was a question of where in Spain. And then Nelson loves the beach, and, you know, he's getting older, and I want to make sure his last few years are fabulous. So I thought, how glorious if his morning walk is along the beach.
And a little town near
Seville. Seville, which in terms of feeling wonderful about a place, is a really fabulous place, but don't all flock there. Because you'll ruin my style.
When you're choosing a city to live and to just go and start over, and living as a female alone as well, a lot of people always ask me, how do you make a decision as a female? And I've always lived alone in my own apartments with no flatmates. What are the prerequisites for you? What does the city have to offer in order for you to say, yes, I could see myself living here?
Well, I'm very sporty and outdoorsy. So just lots of activity. So activity for me is important. And a kind of byproduct of that is then you have these kind of sporting communities that you can become a part of, and that makes it much easier for meeting people and those sorts of things. for me, I have to be somewhere vibrant. Because I'm a people person, and I need that kind of energy.
Yeah.
And generally, this is why I blended so well with Madrid, is because their kind of joie de vivre and the way they live their lives is incredibly. Vibrant's not even the word. It's just sort of buzzy, high energy. I need that.
Yeah.
But not in a kind of. I don't just want a student town.
Sure.
It's not a kind of partying thing.
That's
It's
an
more
important distinction, because sometimes you can walk down a place and you'd be like, oh, this place is alive, and then you just think, oh, but it's just all university students.
And so it's more that it's just a natural way of being across all generations. And even the village I grew up in France, they have this annual fête, la fête du village. And I went to it last year, and it's just, it's so alive. And, and then they get, and this is just this tiny little village in France.
Yeah.
And everyone just, all generations sharing food and wine and everybody dancing. So, the great grandfather dancing with the little 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And, I just think it's such a glorious way of going through life.
Yeah.
And I miss that, because in London is really quite disconnected. I think London's wonderful for particular types of people, but it's just I'm not that type of person.
Yeah. How do you make friends when you arrive in a place? I'm
not the person to ask.
You're not. You're so bubbly. I just imagine that
well, actually, I will tell you, get a dog.
Oh yeah, that's a good. Yeah,
it's a good tip, because dog walkers, honestly, dog lovers, are the best of humanity. Truly, you have natural conversations with people, dog walking. You ask them tips for the vet, then you swap numbers, and that sort of naturally happens. Because I'm naturally quite curious about people and quite chatty. I will very often sit down in a restaurant and start talking to the people on the table next to me. Yeah, which is probably really annoying for people, but it happens.
Yeah. Actually, Americans are great at that, aren't they? Americans are great at just chatting. When I've flown and I'm beside Americans on a plane, I find that they very easily segue into conversation. They're like, tell me about you.
Exactly. And I had a lovely one recently. I was at dinner with a Corsican friend, and the family on the table next to us was Syrian. They were from Damascus, and we ended up having this beautiful conversation. And there was the grandfather and the daughter and the son-in-law and the 3 kids, and I was like, this is wonderful. We've got Syrian, Corsican, Russian, British, French mix, just all having this. I just thought it was fabulous.
Which is one of the great things about London, is it is a multicultural
it is
hub. That brings together people from all different walks of life too, which is great.
But I think it's a little bit like New York, less so Paris. These kind of financial hubs.
Yeah.
Because people are so focused and so driven and so focused on their destination as they're walking down the street.
Yeah.
There's I don't want to say lack of friendliness, because I don't think that's fair, but there's this kind of inaccessibility, which I don't find in smaller cities or even Madrid, which is a financial hub. People are not stuck to their phones. They're having their coffee and looking around and chatting and smiling at people, and it's a friendlier, more open environment, I think.
Anywhere I've gone, I've tried to find my coffee spot, even though I no longer drink coffee, but for the morning, and then I'll go there with some frequency, so that then I'm finding the same people every in the morning, or your barista starts knowing you, or I'll just sit there for even if I'm really busy, I can take half an hour to have a cafe. Well, actually, I have it standing up at the bar, but then I'll go and sit down and maybe order a juice or something, and then I think that's a good way in a new city to sort of distinguish yourself in a gentle way. It's like I'm here and I'm not just a tourist, and people start to see you again, and they're like, oh, you've been here like every day this week or something.
Yeah, and then you naturally start having conversations.
Yeah.
And like joy, I do think joy, if you're a sporty person, joining a sports club, like a tennis club, or, you know, if you do athletic, or, you know, whatever it may be, that's a very good way of meeting people. And then, you know, it's quite different. I think when you're passing through somewhere, you're much less likely to be gutsy about going to sit in a bar and have a glass of wine by yourself. I think if you know that you're going to give it a really good shot for however long, then you're much more likely to find that within yourself.
Yeah.
Because you know, even as an extrovert and people person, it's not comfortable, you know, to go and just sit in a bar somewhere or a restaurant. And I do it very comfortably when I'm flying through somewhere.
Oh, really?
If you know, work-wise, I'm staying in a hotel, I'll always go down and sit. I'm very comfortable doing it that way. But if I'm trying to settle somewhere, I find it a little bit more
that's so
intimidating.
Funny. I wonder if that's because the narrative in one's head is like, oh, I'm just on holiday here, so that's why I'm alone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if we do it, if in your home city, it's like, oh, don't you have friends or a partner or something else like that? But I've eaten out a lot alone in my life, and I do quite enjoy it because I love people watching, and sometimes I find it as an introvert, it's not draining to be around people but not interacting with them. So I'm just there, and maybe I'm writing or I'm reading or I'm just watching them, but I do think that it's for a lot of people write to me, particularly women, and say, gosh, it's so hard just to go out and have a meal by yourself and not think, oh gosh, you know, how are people treating me, how are people looking on this, you know.
But do you find it, because for me it's less about, oh goodness, I'm by myself, but it's more, you know, there have been some cities where I sit and try to have a glass of wine, and you basically get a little bit harassed.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of, you know, and actually that's another factor if I'm picking a city, is, you know, kind of feeling a level of safety. Is obviously really important.
No, you're right, and that's what didn't that happen to you in Portugal?
In Lisbon, unfortunately. That said, I don't want men to think that they can't do that.
No, that's true.
No, but that's really important.
Okay.
Because there's a huge distinction between being harassed and somebody saying a nice hello and seeing if you would like company.
Of course, yeah.
But then it's about your response. Yeah. You know, and a very respectful man will be like, have a wonderful evening, and we'll leave you alone if you've just said. But, you know, people who persist when you've quite clearly been like, no thanks, then that's where the distinction is.
Yeah. This lovely girl wrote to me and asked, she was sharing some of her experiences in Rome and saying, have you ever fallen out? Did you ever fall out of love with Rome, Kylie, or with a city? And think about giving it another shot. And do you find, or when something happens, particularly sometimes it can be like a breakup, or you just have a series of months where it's really dreary weather and you think, oh, I'm not feeling it anymore. Do you give a city another chance, or do you?
So, because I've done it twice.
Really?
So, London. Yeah. So, you know, the first time round, it was just not good for me at all, and that's when I was a lawyer. And then I honestly thought I would never go back.
Really?
And then it just, when I did go back, you know, 3 years ago, I did weigh it up quite a lot, because I sort of thought I was remembering what it had felt like and how wrong it had felt. Yeah. And so I thought it was worth giving it a chance, because I truly believe that, you know, we evolve so much as humans in different ways that, you know, maybe I wasn't ready for it when I was younger, whereas now I would be. You know, that was kind of my line of thinking. Anyway, as it transpires, no. But it was worth giving it a shot. And then Madrid, the first time round, was just the happiest time of my life. I mean, it was truly magical.
Yeah.
and everything just fit into place. You know, I made friends immediately. I had really rewarding work. I was living in a beautiful place. Life was so full and vibrant and wonderful. And, you know, it was everything.
Were you tempted to go back to Madrid then?
Yeah, so this time around.
Yeah.
No, because in the interim, I did go back a second time. And it was a completely different experience.
Really?
Yeah, and it was sort of... The friends I'd made the first time round were still there, but all their lives had kind of moved on, you know, and they had babies, and because there was probably a couple of years in between the two. They'd got married, or they'd moved away, or they'd changed jobs, and they were then in a different group of people, and I think, in hindsight, perhaps what I should have done is not try to recreate what it had been the first time, because that's what I was going back for, you know. But everything had shifted, and so really I should have treated it as a fresh start and done it a little bit differently. But I didn't, and then it didn't last very long. It only lasted sort of 8 months because it just wasn't making me happy.
It's like in my family, we say you can never recreate the same experience. Like, even if you go back to a restaurant, never expect it to be that same meal, because it won't ever be that with the ambience. It might just be a different level of chatter in the background that will change the meal for you, you know.
Exactly.
And that I'm just thinking, in Rome, my gosh, I feel like I lived 9 different lives or something in it, because I had a time when I was just super social. My gosh, I had like 4 different dates in one night. I mean, not with a man, but just with different groups, you know. But there was like a date with there was like aperitivo, and then there was a cena, and then there was a dopo cena, and then there was dancing, and then there was, after the dancing, there's when everyone goes to the bakery at like 4 or 5 a.m. to get the first cornetti, and that was so full on that I didn't stop. I mean, every hour of my day there was something, and I was just there for it. I was like, say yes to everything. Exactly. But it was also a time that I guess probably it was so fun, but there was less, probably less depth, you know what I mean? Like, I was interacting with meeting all the different people, and that was super exciting. And then there were other times in Rome where I wasn't going out nearly as much, but I had very substantial, meaningful relationships, whether it would be like a romantic relationship or a friendship, and I was just basically a hermit, you know. But still, and then the city changes for you totally, you know, because on one side I was like experiencing Rome at sunrise. Well, no, I was always experiencing Rome at sunrise, to be honest. I was either out like partying after a long night out dancing and getting you know, cornetti with friends, or I was just up on my little terrazza in Rome, just like writing poetry and filming the sunrise and thinking like, oh, what do I want from life? And, you know, but I, you know, it's amazing, because then sometimes I just think you can't blame the city, because you just got to think, well, the people you're associating with do show you a different side of the city, don't you think? Definitely.
But I also think, you know, you have to follow what you're curious about, because there's a reason you're curious about it. So, you know, for me, with the second time in Madrid, that's what I was following, was the fact that I was wondering about it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then, you know, even though it didn't turn out to be what I hoped the second time round, at least then I could put it to bed. You know, I'd explored that curiosity, and I was like, okay, no, it's not happening. And this is why with this new Spanish place, like, something is calling me.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of Frozen 2. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I think I have. But what is it? You're going to break into song? Please break into song.
No, I'm not going to. But in Frozen 2, in which I think the messaging is spot on.
Okay. I'm with you.
Elsa.
What is she
educating the masses. You haven't seen it.
Oh, something's calling you. Oh, yeah, that's right. When she goes,
it's calling. So this sound is calling her, and she's like, "I won't follow you because I've had my adventure." Oh, yeah, you know, and she's like, she's resisting it, and then in the end, she kind of gives into it, and that's what leads her into her power. And you know, it's very. Anyway,
it's true.
No, it's wonderful. But so I think if something, for whatever reason, is calling you, you at least have to respect that call and explore it in some capacity. That sounds far too deep. It's much deeper than what I intend to say, but it's just...
No, I understand. And I think even if it doesn't lead you to say, okay, this is the city I'm going to be in for my whole life, or this is the person I'm going to be with for my whole life, if something, you need to see that tangent out to its natural demise. No. On its natural course. No.
Yes.
So that because you have to live it out, because you're right, it is that, or maybe it's just in us, it's that itch, it's that curiosity that says, I've got to know what this feels like, and I've got to see this out wherever it leads me.
Yeah, or like, what's this about? Was, but it's the same with sort of hobbies. If there's always been that thing.
Yeah.
That you're somehow attracted to, when I say it calls you in some way, like it's something that kind of ruminates in your mind.
How's the jazz saxophone going?
Like that. Well, I'm waiting for my little place in Spain, so I don't kill the cats.
Your neighbours are going to be so happy. They're like, this girl's moved in and she's a pianist and she's learning jazz saxophone. And
But this is my thing about the jazz saxophone.
hang on, just 1 minute. We're just interrupted by Gianfranco, but basically, you're a beautiful, beautiful soul, and I'm so lucky to have you in my life, and I've been so lucky to have you in so many different chapters of my life, and I can't wait to see how this new chapter goes for you.
Thank you, Reinhardt.
I feel so emotional.
Would you like to meet Nelson?
We'll definitely meet Nelson.
Nelson, come here, my love. Come here, sweetie. Oh, you're going to come up? You're going to see
He
Kylie.
waited so patiently.
Here he is.
You've been waiting. Can we see him?
Beautiful nose.
He's been so quiet.
What's this? You say hello to everybody.
You're so polite.
We're so hot and 35 degrees.
Yeah. You've been so quiet.